The White M16 Halftrack was not built to be elegant, comfortable, or subtle. It was built to make the sky unsafe, the ground hostile, and enemy infantry very nervous. Originally developed during World War II, this vehicle represents one of the most aggressive mobile air defense concepts of its era, and at the same time, one of the most versatile improvised combat platforms the Allies ever fielded. At its core, the M16 was based on the standard American half-track chassis, most commonly derived from the M3 series. The layout was simple but brutally effective. Wheels in the front for steering, tracks in the rear for traction, and a fighting compartment that was open on top. This open design made the crew vulnerable to shrapnel and weather, but it also allowed unrestricted weapon movement, fast reloading, and excellent visibility, which matters a lot when your job is to shoot things that move very fast. Power came from the White 160AX inline six-cylinder gasoline engine. Displacement was 6.3 liters, producing about 147 horsepower. Torque output reached approximately 420 Newton-meters, which equals about 310 pound-feet of torque. This torque mattered more than top speed because the M16 often operated off-road, carrying heavy weapon systems and ammunition. Maximum road speed was around 72 kilometers per hour, or roughly 45 miles per hour, fast enough to keep up with armored columns, but never fast enough to escape trouble on its own. Weight was substantial. Combat weight came in at about 9.3 tons, or roughly 20,500 pounds. Length measured approximately 6.1 meters, or 20 feet. Width was about 2.2 meters, or 7.2 feet. And height, with weapons mounted, reached nearly 2.8 meters, or just over 9 feet. It was tall, loud, and impossible to hide, which is ironic for a vehicle whose primary enemy was aircraft. The most famous version, and the one most people imagine when hearing M16, was armed with the M45 Quadmount. This mount carried four 50-caliber Browning M2 heavy machine guns. Each gun fired the 12.7 by 99 millimeter cartridge, and together they created a wall of lead that could reach aircraft flying low and slow. Combined rate of fire was staggering, up to 2,300 rounds per minute. In practice, gunners fired in controlled bursts because otherwise the ammunition disappeared faster than morale in a losing army. As an anti-aircraft platform, the M16 was devastating against dive bombers, ground attack aircraft, and reconnaissance planes. Pilots quickly learned to respect these vehicles because even a short burst could shred control surfaces or engines. However, against high-altitude bombers, the M16 was far less effective. It simply didn't have the elevation reach or ballistic performance to threaten aircraft flying high and fast. Where the M16 truly earned its reputation was on the ground. Against infantry, trucks, and lightly armored vehicles, the Quad 50s were terrifying. A single burst could clear trenches, punch through brick walls, and turn unarmored vehicles into scrap. Infantry units often described the M16 as mobile suppression on demand. If something needed to stop moving, the M16 was usually very good at convincing it. But the story doesn't end with machine guns. There were also variants and field conversions that replaced or supplemented the Quadmount with a 37mm autocannon paired with two 50-caliber machine guns. These configurations were less common, but extremely interesting. The 37mm gun offered a completely different capability profile. While its rate of fire was lower, it fired explosive shells capable of damaging light armor, fortified positions, and even early or lightly armored tanks. Against tanks, effectiveness was mixed. Early war light tanks and armored cars were vulnerable, especially from the sides or rear. Medium and heavy tanks, however, were largely immune unless hit in very specific weak points. In these situations, the 37mm gun functioned more as harassment and support than as a true tank killer. It could break tracks, damage optics, or force crews to button up, which in combat can be just as valuable as penetration. In the anti-infantry role, the combination of a 37mm cannon and heavy machine guns was brutal. High explosive shells followed by machine gun fire created a layered effect: shock, fragmentation, and suppression. This made such variants extremely useful in urban combat, convoy defense, and rapid response to ambushes. Of course, the M16 had serious weaknesses. Armor protection was minimal. Armor thickness ranged from about 6 to 12 millimeters, which equals roughly 0.24 to 0.47 inches. This was enough to stop small arms fire and shell fragments, but absolutely useless against anti-tank weapons. The open-top design meant grenades, mortars, and artillery were constant threats. Crews relied on mobility, awareness, and friendly units for survival, not armor.
Another drawback was crew fatigue. Operating the Quadmount required constant attention, physical effort, and coordination. After long engagements, gunners were exhausted, ears ringing, arms numb, and eyes burning from muzzle flash and smoke. Comfort was not part of the design philosophy. Logistics were also a challenge. The M16 consumed enormous amounts of ammunition. A single intense engagement could burn through thousands of rounds in minutes. Keeping these vehicles supplied required dedicated logistics support, and without ammunition, the M16 was just a very loud truck with tracks. Despite these flaws, the M16 proved so effective that it remained in service long after World War II. It saw combat in Korea, was exported to many Allied nations, and even appeared in conflicts decades later. In some armies, it was still in use when jet aircraft had already replaced propeller planes, not because it was modern, but because it was reliable and terrifyingly effective at close range. In the end, the White M16 Halftrack was never meant to be elegant or future-proof. It was meant to solve a problem right now with overwhelming force. Whether tearing into low-flying aircraft, suppressing enemy infantry, or taking risky shots at armored targets, it delivered exactly what commanders needed: mobile firepower that could appear suddenly, make a lot of noise, and change the situation very quickly. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most aggressive half-tracks ever built, don't forget to subscribe, because the next vehicle will be just as strange, just as dangerous, and maybe even louder.